If you stand on the shoreline of Canyon Lake today, the first thing you notice isn't the water. It's the scar. A blindingly white ring of exposed limestone circles the basin like a skeletal remains of a higher tide. It is a bathtub ring of catastrophic proportions, marking a vertical drop of more than 20 feet from the lake's intended capacity. To grasp that scale, imagine a fleet of heavy-duty pickup trucks parked on the surrounding ridges. If the lake were at its design level, those vehicles wouldn't just be splashing, they would be swallowed by 10 feet of water. But today, they sit high and dry, looking down at a receding blue pulse that is fading by the hour. The crisis in the Texas Hill Country isn't a slow-motion tragedy anymore. It has accelerated into a full-scale hydrological hemorrhage. As of this morning, the data is cold and indisputable. Canyon Lake is losing 34 million gallons of water every single day. This isn't a projection or a what-if scenario cooked up by a climate model. It is the measured, real-time reality documented by water managers who are watching their primary resource bleed out into a thirsty atmosphere and a parched earth. Since the start of 2026, the region has been trapped in a relentless cycle of subtraction. Every time the sun sets, another 106 acre-feet of water has vanished, evaporated, or drained before the next dawn. For those living in the shadow of San Antonio, the numbers are even more haunting. Since 2022, the area has racked up a water debt of nearly 45 inches of rainfall. This isn't just a dry spell. It's a multi-year compounding deficit where every missed storm adds another layer of interest to a debt the sky seems unable to pay. In the first 2 months of this year alone, San Antonio has seen a 60 rainfall deficit, with some local stations recording less than an inch of total precipitation. The consequences of this math are visible to anyone trying to launch a boat. Every single public motorized ramp on Canyon Lake is now a dead end of cracked silt and gravel. The silence at the docks is eerie, a stark contrast to the roar of engines that usually defines this Texas landmark. But while the recreational loss is tragic, it's the quiet panic in the boardrooms of water utilities that should truly alarm us. In Comal County, one of the fastest-growing regions in America, developers are being told the unthinkable. The water simply isn't there to guarantee. But as dire as 34 million gallons a day sounds, Canyon Lake isn't even the most chilling part of the story. To see the true face of the apocalypse, you have to look 40 miles to the west, where a sister reservoir has already crossed the point of no return. To understand why Canyon Lake is hemorrhaging water, you have to look beneath the surface literally. The Texas Hill Country sits atop a geological formation that is as beautiful as it is treacherous for water management. This is the realm of Karst topography, a landscape sculpted over millions of years from Cretaceous period limestone. Think of the ground here not as a solid basement, but as a massive stony sponge. This limestone is riddled with a labyrinth of solution channels, caves, and fracturisa Swiss cheese architecture that allows water to move in ways that defy traditional engineering. When Canyon Lake was impounded in the 1960s, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had a triple mandate: provide a reliable thirst quencher for growing cities, create a recreational oasis, and, most importantly, tame the violent flash floods that define the Guadalupe River basin. For decades, the system worked with clockwork precision. The lake was designed to be a resilient buffer, a massive bucket sitting in the heart of the hill country. But in a karst environment, the bucket has holes. In times of extreme drought, the hydrostatic pressure changes. The very geology that allows the Edwards and Trinity aquifers to recharge can also become a drain. As the water table drops, the lake isn't just evaporating into the sky. It's being pulled downward into the insatiable voids of the earth. This geological reality creates a cruel irony. In July 2025, the region was slammed by catastrophic floods, the kind of 1,000-year events that turn dry creek beds into raging torrents in minutes. For a brief moment, the lake surged back to nearly 70 capacity. People celebrated, believing the crisis had broken. But they failed to account for the recharge reality. In a parched karst landscape, a single flood event is like throwing a cup of water onto a hot, cracked sidewalk. Much of that water never makes it to the reservoir. It's swallowed by sinkholes or consumed by soil that has reached a state of hydrophobicity, where it actually repels moisture until it's saturated. The 1960s vision of a permanent, stable reservoir assumed a climate and a geological stability that is now being tested to its breaking point. We are witnessing the collapse of a triad: drinking water, flood control, and recreation that once seemed invincible. As the limestone foundation continues to drink what the humans are trying to save, the margin for error has vanished. Water managers are no longer looking at the weather forecast for hope. They are looking at the geological clock, wondering how much dead storage is actually left before the pumps start sucking air. But if Canyon Lake is a warning, then 40 miles to the west, we find the eulogy. To see what happens when the Karst trap finally snaps shut, we must look at a place where the term lake has become a haunting misnomer. If Canyon Lake is a patient in critical condition, Medina Lake just 40 miles to the west is the autopsy. To visit Medina today is to witness the architectural skeleton of a community's broken promise. 7 years ago, this was a vibrant blue expanse, a recreational jewel of the hill country where families spent summers and farmers drew the lifeblood for their crops. Today, it has effectively ceased to function as a lake. It sits at a haunting 4.2 capacity, roughly 86 feet below its spillway. What remains is little more than a muddy, landlocked puddle, a shallow mirror reflecting a sky that has forgotten how to rain. To understand the gravity of Medina's collapse, you must understand a term that haunts every water manager in the American West: Deadpool. This isn't just a dramatic label. It is a precise and terrifying technical threshold in hydraulic engineering. Every dam is designed with outlet pipes at specific elevations. When a reservoir hits Deadpool status, the water level drops below the lowest gravity-fed intake. At this point, the lake's relationship with the world downstream is severed. Gravity, the force that usually carries water to treatment plants and irrigation canals, no longer works. The reservoir becomes a dead body of water, unable to flow, unable to provide, and unable to protect against the very floods it was built to manage. Medina Lake hit this terminal state in early 2025 and has effectively been under a 3-year siege, rarely peaking above 10 capacity. The human cost of this hydrological death is staggering. For generations, the farmers of the Medina Valley relied on the lake to sustain their fields. When the water dropped below the intakes, that legacy ended overnight. They were forced into a desperate pivot, drilling deeper into the groundwater, a move that is expensive, ecologically taxing, and ultimately unsustainable. Local business owners who built marinas and lakeside restaurants are now staring at miles of cracked silt where their livelihood used to float. Dave Mock of the Bandera County River Authority summarized the situation with a chilling simplicity that echoes through the valley. It has simply been too dry for too long. There is no policy framing that can soften the blow of a lake that has vanished. But Medina's fate isn't just a localized tragedy. It is a preview of the trajectory for the entire region. The same arithmetic of loss that decimated Medina is now being applied, gallon by gallon, to its neighbors. And as the population of Central Texas continues to explode, the demand for what little water remains is reaching a fever pitch. The Texas Hill Country was once a place of rugged isolation, defined by its scrub cedar and the quiet, rolling limestone hills between Austin and San Antonio. For generations, it was a weekend escapee, a place for a slow drive through a vineyard or a cold dip in a spring-fed river. But over the last 2 decades, that pastoral identity has been overwritten by a relentless tide of concrete and cul-de-sacs. The Texas dream moved into Comal and Kendall counties, fueled by an explosive migration of families seeking cheaper land and open horizons. New Braunfels and San Marcos transformed from sleepy river towns into some of the fastest-growing urban centers in the United States. But as the subdivisions climbed the hills, they brought with them a demand for a resource that the land simply could not scale up. This is where the Texas miracle of economic growth has slammed into a physical, hydrological wall. In early 2025, a seismic shift occurred in the region's development landscape. The Texas Water Company, a utility serving nearly 80,000 residents, took the unprecedented step of denying service to 9 major new housing developments. This wasn't a bureaucratic delay or a zoning dispute. It was a hard, arithmetical no. The utility stated plainly that it could no longer guarantee that water would flow when future residents turned on their taps. This moment exposed the infrastructure paradox of the modern Sunbelt. We have become incredibly efficient at building the delivery systems, the massive pumps, the miles of PVC piping, and the high-pressure storage tanks. But infrastructure is only a straw. It doesn't matter how wide the straw is if the glass is empty. In the hill country, we are facing a crisis of source water. There is a legal distinction, often made in water law, between paper water, the rights granted to a developer on a piece of parchment, and wet water, the actual liquid sitting in the reservoir. For the first time in the history of the region's modern expansion, the paper water has far outpaced the wet water. The math of the boom was predicated on the assumption that the wet years of the mid-20th century were the permanent baseline. But as the drought of 2022-2026 continues to bake the landscape, it's becoming clear that the region built its future on a hydrological mirage. The 71 consecutive weeks of extreme drought in San Antonio aren't just a weather event. They are a stress test that the current system is failing. As the population continues to surge, the margin for error has narrowed to nothing. Now, the people who already live here are watching the water they rely on retreat further away every morning. And for some, the only way to survive is to literally chase the shoreline into the deepest parts of the basin. When a lake begins to vanish, the businesses built upon its banks are forced into a surreal, high-stakes game of pursuit. At Canyon Lake, the shoreline is no longer a fixed boundary. It is a retreating front line. For the owners of Crane's Mill Marina, the drought isn't just an environmental crisis, it's a logistical marathon. As the water level plummeted, the entire marina facility docks, slips, and the ship's store had to be physically uprooted and relocated over 1,000 feet further out into the basin. This wasn't a minor adjustment. It was a fundamental migration across what was, only months prior, the lake floor. Following the waterline in real time is the only way to keep the business afloat, turning the marina into a nomadic outpost on a shrinking sea. This shoreline chase creates a profound psychological shift in the community. For decades, Canyon Lake was marketed as the water recreation capital of Texas, a place of endless summer and motorized freedom. But that identity is being stripped away as the infrastructure fails. When every public motorized boat ramp is shuttered, reduced to dead ends of sun-bleached gravel, the economic ripple effect is immediate. Dustin Smith, who runs a local boat detailing business called Below the Belt Services, captures the quiet anxiety of the local workforce. While he remains busy for now, the math is inescapable. If people can't put their boats in the water, the boats eventually run out. The service economy that relies on the recreation aspect of the reservoir is staring at a horizon where their primary commodity accesses simply evaporated. There is a haunting paradox at play on the receding banks. Mason Perez, a dock hand who has witnessed the retreat firsthand, notes that while the water levels are scary, the low tide has actually drawn a strange influx of curious visitors. People come to walk the exposed sediment, exploring ghost landscapes and artifacts that haven't seen sunlight in 60 years. They see more shoreline, more space, and perhaps a novelty in the catastrophe. But for those whose lives are tethered to the lake's health, this isn't a silver lining tourism boost. It is a measurement of a system in collapse. Canyon Lake was never intended to be a beach. It is a critical municipal reservoir for 70,000 people in San Marcos and the surrounding hill country. The aesthetic change from water to dirt is more than just a visual shock. It represents the death of a functional landscape. Every foot of exposed silt is a foot of lost storage, lost cooling capacity, and lost security. As the businesses continue to retreat, they are finding that the new normal isn't a stable state, it's a downward slide. And as they look toward the looming Texas summer, the local residents are beginning to realize that the double drain is about to accelerate, pulling the water away from them not just from the surface, but from the very ground beneath their feet. While the visible decline of Canyon Lake is haunting, there is an invisible war being waged beneath the limestone that most people never see. Hydrologists refer to this as the double drain effect, a term championed by Robert Mace, one of the state's preeminent water scientists. To understand the double drain is to understand that Canyon Lake isn't just a container. It's a leaky vessel being attacked from two sides simultaneously. On the surface, the Texas sun acts as a relentless atmospheric vacuum. During the peak summer months, evaporation doesn't just happen. It dominates. In the hill country heat, the lake can lose up to a quarter-inch of depth every single day to the sky alone. Across thousands of acres of surface area, that invisible theft accounts for millions of gallons that simply vanish into thin air. But it's the drain from below that truly exposes the fragility of the hill country's water security. Beneath the bed of Canyon Lake lies a complex network of faults and fractures, most notably the Hidden Valley Fault Zone. We know exactly what this looks like because of the Canyon Lake Gorge, a massive chasm carved out by the 2002 floods that stripped away the soil to reveal the skeletal limestone beneath. What it showed was a geological Swiss cheese. Scientists have found through geochemical testing that springs in the area are actually being fed by the lake itself. As the surrounding Trinity and Edwards aquifers are pumped dry by the region's explosive population, the pressure balance shifts. The lake essentially begins to leak. This creates a terrifying feedback loop. As groundwater levels drop due to thousands of private and municipal wells, the suction from the earth increases. The reservoir isn't just providing water through the pipes of the Guadalupe-Blanco River Authority. It is being bled out through the very rock it sits on. It is a double drain with no redundancy. In previous droughts, the aquifers held enough pressure to keep the lake relatively stable. But in 2026, we are witnessing a synchronized collapse. The surface water is retreating to the sky, and the groundwater is pulling the remaining liquid into the deep voids of the limestone. As we move deeper into the spring of 2026, the seasonal forecasts are bleak. We are entering the most punishing evaporation season of the decade with a reservoir that is already 20 feet below its design. The 34 million gallons lost today is a baseline. As the mercury rises toward 100 degrees and the humidity drops, that number will likely climb. We are facing a summer where the arithmetic of survival becomes a zero-sum game. The machinery of state government is running at full tilt to address the crisis, but they are finding that while you can legislate policy, you cannot legislate the physics of a parched earth. The disaster declarations are signed, and the funding is allocated, but as the hill country stares down the barrel of the 2026 summer heat, a more existential realization is beginning to take hold. Even if we stop every pump and shut off every tap, we cannot stop the sky from taking its share. The machinery of government is a noisy, industrious thing. In the halls of the Texas Capitol, the response to the vanishing hill country has been prolific. Governor Abbott's drought disaster declarations have covered more than 90 counties in a continuous, rolling state of emergency since July 2022. Billions of dollars have been allocated through ambitious water infrastructure bills, and the Texas Water Development Board has churned out thousands of pages of frameworks, studies, and long-term allocations. To look at the paperwork, one might think the crisis is being managed with surgical precision. But as any resident of Comal or Bandera County will tell you, there is a profound, echoing silence between the signing of a bill and the falling of a raindrop. The fundamental tension of 2026 is the disconnect between political willpower and hydrological reality. We are pouring money into a system where the source has simply stopped participating. Catherine Romans of the Hill Country Alliance has noted that for the thousands of residents involved in regional planning, water has surpassed roads, schools, and taxes as the singular priority for survival. Yet, even the most advanced desalination plants or pipeline projects require time that the 34 million gallon daily loss at Canyon Lake is rapidly stealing. We are learning, in the harshest way possible, that while you can fund a pipe, you cannot fund a cloud. Geologically and historically, this may be more than just a bad stretch. Paleoclimatic data gathered from ancient tree rings and sediment layers suggests that the Texas Hill Country has endured megadroughts in the distant past that lasted for decades, not years. If we are entering such a cycle, the 45-inch rainfall deficit we see today isn't the bottom of the pit. It's the beginning of a new, arid baseline. The bathtub ring on the limestone cliffs of Canyon Lake is no longer just a temporary stain. It is becoming a monument to a climate that the region's current infrastructure was never designed to handle. As the sun sets over the receding waters of the Guadalupe Basin, The question is no longer when the lake will return to its 1960s glory. The question is how much of the Texas dream can survive in a landscape where the water has decided to leave. We are watching a transformation of the American West in real time, where the arithmetic of growth is finally being forced to settle its debts. Stand on the edge of the dust where the waves used to crash, and you realize the truth. The declarations are signed, the marinas have moved, and the developers have been turned away. All that is left is to wait and see what remains of the hill country when the last of the 34 million gallons is gone.